This story is called Saudade, which is a Portuguese word that means longing for something or someone. It's from my collection Secret Lives and takes place at an Ikea in Cincinnati. Saudade. A bright green cab dropped Sven at the main entrance to Ikea. He passed into the shopping fray, his lithe frame layered in crisp linen pants and a spring jacket. His unremarkable nose supported a pair of aluminum glasses. Nearing the escalator, he glanced toward the daycare and pinched a bit of fuzz from his sleeve. The line there was long. Carla stared at the black arrow on the floor, a pause rippling through the crowd behind her. She had shown Obie the meatballs on the little sign, but he had told her to go to hell and said he'd rather get a hot dog at the gas station on the way home. She was going to have meatballs, though. Her face shone beet red, making her blonde hair look yellow. She had just wanted to get out of the house and look at picture frames, sleeper sofas, or maybe get a bookcase for her new photo albums. She should have brought her mother instead, wheelchair, catheter bag, and all. She bit into the quick of her thumb, drawing a drop of blood. Keeping a steady 15 feet in front of her, Obie gripped the handle of the shopping cart like he was throttling something. A box of wooden spoons lay at the bottom. The overhead lighting changed every few feet. He glared at a display of shelf lighting with its tiny pinpricks of light. His chest felt tight. Plus, he didn't like to put stuff together with little screws. It had been Carla who made him lug that damn particle board crib home. It had taken him a good 3 days to figure it out. Based in Stockholm, Sven designed contemporary lighting solutions for IKEA. After 2 weeks in the Åland Islands with his boyfriend Nils, Sven was at the Cincinnati outlet for what his boss called a working vacation. He was to stroll the store, observe his creations in situ, scattering light into corners of bookcases, dispersing shadows on countertops, and return home gleaming with inspiration, as Nils had joked. Once in the vast upper-level showrooms, Sven aligned himself with the flow of human traffic, scanning the overhead signs for shortcuts. Aside from an abundance of large bottoms squeezed into black stretchy pants and the shouting that passed as conversation, Sven felt the familiar hum of distraction one might feel at an IKEA outside of Amsterdam or Singapore. Sven enjoyed poetry. He imagined he was transparent. "Obie!" Carla shouted. Obie looked back. His eyes bulged and he mouthed, "What?" She motioned for him to come look at a rug, a round wool rug. He turned the cart, looking down at the wooden spoons as if they could show him the way. Carla looked hopeful. "Red like that?" Obie fingered the rug. "Jesus, Carla, you looking for something to murder me on?" She frowned, bent forward, and slid her hand across a knobby ridge running through the rug. They needed something soft to cover the hard tile in the basement. With the mold down there, carpeting made it worse, but she could take a rug outside and air it in the sun. Obie went psh like a ruptured tire. "Well, what about this here rug for the back door where you track in all that mud?" She ran her finger over a bluish doormat with a gray rubber back. He ignored her and pushed on. "Do you know where you're going?" said Carla. "We need to get back upstairs and look at the little sofa beds. Besides, I'm getting hungry." Her face glistened. She could feel the glaze getting thicker by the minute. "I bet they got coffee up there." Obie's shoulders relaxed and a semblance of order settled behind his wild eyes. "Which way?" He stroked his stringy beard. As Carla directed from behind, a twinge crept into his stomach. Sven counted syllables, running a poem through his head. He arrived at the first open area, a furniture meadow sprinkled with azure couches, goldenrod sectionals, and candy apple laminate chairs. Sven sat in a boxy chair and observed the shoppers for a few minutes. He polished his glasses with a lint-free cloth, and someone asked him what he thought the color of the chair he was sitting in was. "It is tangerine," he said. A copper-skinned lady with horn-rimmed glasses and spandex pants nodded. He folded his hands in his lap and watched her waddle away. She smelled of nutmeg and cigarettes and lemons. His cell phone vibrated in his coat pocket. Nils. They spoke for a few minutes, Nils telling him of the librarian's strange new hairstyle, Sven recounting last night's dream of a talking lamp. "Good morning, good morning, good morning." But after a knocking sound, Nils said a quick goodbye, explaining that a student had arrived to ask about an exam score. Ill at ease, Sven watched the couples. He noticed a tired, beast-like man look back and pause. The man was pushing a cart, unusual in the showrooms. A plump, blonde woman in tight jeans with red cheeks and a shiny face called out to him before he moved forward again. Newlyweds on their first visit, he thought. Sven coaxed a smile. "Come on!" Obie yelled with his eyes, jerking his head in the direction he intended. He plowed forward, hunting for the coffee. Carla yelled at him to slow down. An old woman wearing a headscarf frowned. Obie stared back and saw Carla perched on a little couch. He shook his head and looked around for a clock. He pushed the cart to the side and waited, hands deep in his pockets. He felt short of breath. Sven stood. He wanted to send Nils a photo, a little treat, but felt awkward taking one of himself. Suddenly, a small bird dipped through the showroom, its wings beating the air in short, irregular bursts. An associate in the couch area looked as if he might do something and pulled a microphone closer to his mouth. The little bird flitted into the overhead tangle of duct and cable. Obie noticed the bird and watched it disappear. He relaxed his jaw and sat on the little sofa bed. Damn, hard as a rock. He caught the eye of an old man who reminded him of his grandfather. "I think my tailbone cracked," he said with a pleased look. The old man looked, turned, and walked away. Obie coughed. He had just missed a week at work due to what he thought was the flu. He didn't have insurance and, considering Carla's nightmare with the baby, had said he had rather wait it out than make the 45-minute drive to get tied up in an emergency room all day for nothing. Carla caught up with him and touched his back. Sven snapped a couple of photos and caught the bedraggled man from the waist down. With the precision of a dragonfly, he veered away among the armchairs. "You all right, baby?" asked Carla in a soft voice. She felt the pressure in her head easing. She had begun to realize that she really did love Obie, even though he was such a hard-ass. Except for those 3 days when he had disappeared, he had done pretty good. Sven took a shortcut to the restaurant. The dining area had the feel of a chic hospital cafeteria. He found a table close to a window where he could relax with a cup of coffee. Nils made fun of his caffeine habit. Passing a frowsy, middle-aged couple, he glanced at the man's shoes, noting the new laces. He approached the buffet to look. A strapping, tall man with a mop of wind-blown hair roamed the counter, examining the pans of macaroni and cheese, chicken fingers, fries, and meatballs. A sullen teenage boy in a white chef's apron and a paper hat stared straight ahead. He wore a ring through the corner of his lower lip, and his hair was dyed a strange gray. The large man turned and motioned for Sven to go on ahead, his hand like an oar. Carla let Obie work his way to the restaurant. "Where do I put this damn cart?" Obie seemed nailed to the floor, his hands in his back pockets. He surveyed the dining area as if it were the moon. He had a feeling that certain areas were for certain people. He wasn't even sure the people were speaking English. "Let me push it over there by the window," said Carla. "I'll wait while you get your coffee." "Okay." Sven declined the large man's offer to skip ahead in line. The sullen teenage boy's mouth was shaped like a pear. He liked pears. He caught himself hearing Nils's complaints about his tendency to get carried away with things and felt a pinch in his stomach. He thought of his grandfather holding a briar pipe, smoking aromatic tobacco. "What would you like?" asked the boy, gripping a steel ladle large enough to land a boat in a storm. He nibbled at the ring in his lip. Sven almost replied in Swedish and fumbled his cell phone, dropping it on his tray. "I would like meatballs, thank you." He couldn't believe he had just ordered that. The server dropped his head and scooped up so many, maybe 20, spooning them out like little eggs. Balled potatoes, a spoonful of jam, a sprig of parsley, and he passed the plate to Sven with a distant look. Obie held back from the little man in the soft-looking suit in front of him. He was feeling somewhat better and smelled coffee. He had wandered into the food line, and now a woman and a girl were behind him. He turned his attention in front of him, sizing up the skinny man and the boy with the paper hat. A grunt escaped him, and Sven glanced back. Up close, the severity of the man's face froze Sven in his tracks. He forced his feet toward the cash register. The cashier was all smiles, said "Have a good day," and didn't charge Sven for his coffee. Sven said thank you in German and walked away, his face crimson. Obie found himself speechless in front of the food. He cleared his throat and pushed down the rope lane toward the cash register. He hated to, but asked the cashier where the coffee was. He found the coffee machines and looked around for Carla, who had been standing and waving at him for the last 5 minutes. He frowned at the little tables and orange chairs, stifling a cough. "Good Lord, Obie, sit down and catch your breath. You look like a drowned man wandering around like that." Carla could taste the meatballs. "Where's your coffee, hon?" Obie frowned again and looked around for the bathroom sign. Sven took his steaming mug, headed back to his spot just 2 tables away. A light rain fell and shimmered down the large windows. Sven watched the man from a distance. The man had looked violent up close, like a crab. He stared at his plate, imagining Neil's laughter. So what if he designed gooseneck lamps for spice racks? "Ah, yes, the allspice. Now I see it. Here it is." Sven pushed a meatball with a fork, and it slipped in its bed of gravy. Sven scrolled to a photo of Niels leaning against a beached fishing boat, the brightest blue. The sun squinted his eyes as he stared into the camera, his head tilted to the ground. A dark shadow with tiny pixels of color trickled down the side of his nose. A shock of thick brown hair stood on end from a stiff wind blowing off the lake. Outside the cafeteria, pellets of rain tapped on the window, creating swerves as the water skittered, veered, and tracked down the glass. In the restroom, Obie slouched. He felt queasy and closed his eyes, pressing the side of the cold stall with his fist. He waited, and when it seemed he was alone, he stepped out and moved toward the door. It opened, and he reversed direction to the sink, tried to find the knob for the water, realized it was an automatic spigot, and waved his massive hands back and forth. He jiggered the soap dispenser, and then, after an eternity, water shot from the faucet in short spurts. He shied away from the paper towel dispenser, but like an undeserved pardon, a sheet of thin white paper spooled out with a hum. Sven watched the rough man plod back to the table and his fidgety wife. Obie sat down heavy. "You want to try one?" Carla touched a meatball with her spoon. Obie looked at his hands. Low rumbles of thunder outside told the chill air. "I don't feel right," he said. He felt smaller somehow, as she had been gaining strength since they lost the baby. The cord wrapped 3 times around its little neck. Obie seemed to be losing his. Outside, a long road of sunshine slid through a gash in the clouds, but the rain continued to fall. "Devil's whipping his wife," said Obie. His grandma used to say that. Carla wanted to look at the little sleeper sofas again, but wondered if she should push him. If it had been a matter of stubbornness, she was prepared to outlast him, but sickness was different. "You want to go home?" she said, staring off toward the little man with the cell phone. He looked ill. "That guy at the table by the window, see him? The little skinny guy duded up in them clothes?" "Huh?" Obie didn't want to look. "I think he took your picture with his phone." Her eyes dimmed. She ate 2 more meatballs. The potato looked like the ones from a can, but she liked them from a can. She stared at her sore thumb as if it could speak. "I know you don't feel good, but let's go look at them sleeper sofas. Just a few minutes." Her mother had never been able to spend the night because they only had 1 bed. Purple infused the slate sky outside as the cafeteria filled up for lunch. A young couple with kids sat beside them. Carla's attention shifted to the couple's little boy who gripped his chair for balance. He had rosy cheeks and 2 little nubs of teeth. Sven stood, stomach rumbling. He wondered if it was the smell of the meatballs or that last photo of Nils. He found himself in front of the men's room and pushed at the wrong side of the door, straining his elbow. "You want some more coffee?" Carla reached over and touched Obie's sleeve. He stared at the end of his nose. Long threads of silent lightning veined the sky's belly a bruised yellow. "I don't feel good." Obie pushed himself up with his hands and turned away, heading back to the restroom. Carla smiled at the smart-looking woman holding the little boy, then gazed at the clouds bleeding together in the distance like fat plums. She took Obie's cup and walked over to get herself some coffee, checking with the cashier first. Little pins of water tapping the windows thrummed the air. Sven wet his hands and then his face. He bent and brushed at the top of his shoe. In the mirror, he could see that the stalls were empty. Just for a moment of quiet, he stepped into one, sat down, and put his head in his hands. He felt dehydrated. He remembered his grandfather's dying suddenly. If only he had drunk more water, his poor grandmother had muttered at the funeral. He typed in the passcode to his cell phone. Someone latched the door on the handicap stall loudly. Sven's silver phone leaped from his knee and clattered to the tile floor. Breathing slow and heavy, Obie watched the little phone skitter just beyond his reach. He glanced at the small pair of fancy shoes in the next stall. His gut churned, his head swam, and he closed his eyes. Sven thought the person in the handicap stall sounded quite ill. He then recognized the thick-soled shoes as those of the savage-looking man. The man groaned. Obie took a deep breath and blew it out. The cell phone was open. The angle made the screen hard to see. He leaned and tilted his head, which made him woozy. He cursed and kicked at the phone as hard as he could. "He's so cute," said Carla, fascinated with the little boy. She had a picture in her wallet of her little boy dressed in a tiny white gown. He looked like he was asleep. She had shown it to one person outside the family, but would never do that again. "How old is he?" she asked the woman. 14 months? The woman looked at her husband, who shrugged. Outside, bright flags flapped and strained as gray kites of rain-soaked wind sailed through the jammed parking lots. Sven forgot his jacket at the table and hurried downstairs. He pulled the taxi's card from his wallet and dialed over the cracked screen. Shoppers choked the exits, waiting for the storm to pass. Sven only wanted a glass of milk and to lie down in his hotel room. He thought of his grandfather again. The corner of his eye trembled. "Oh, no," said Carla. Obie flopped into his chair. He looked like a whipped puppy. She could tell it was best to leave. She didn't need the wooden spoons anyway, and then it took them forever and a day to find the exit. A suffocating rain poured in walls as Sven fell into the plain orange taxi. The smell of a clove cigarette and something else. The weight of the storm drowned the thunder, and the cab slowed as a blurred man leaned into the gale. A woman struggled after him, hugging herself, head bent to the pavement. Sven wiped the water from his glasses and asked the driver, who was busy eating a chili dog, to take him to the Sheraton. He sent Nils a text message. So on we worked and waited for the light, shivering, pressing his hands between his thighs. The end. The story was inspired by a visit to Ikea, and I saw a man with a red face and a scraggly beard, and he had a look of misery and terror on his face, and he was with a woman who had a beet red face and yellow hair, and he just seemed so miserable, and I couldn't forget his face, and so that was the inspiration for Obie in this story. All right, I appreciate it.